Welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts, with hosts Margaret Pickoff and Tim Abbey.
Hello, and welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast from Penn State Extension for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts. I'm one of your hosts, Margaret Pickoff. I'm a horticulture educator with Penn State Extension, and on each episode, I'm joined by my colleagues on the green industry team as co-hosts. On today's episode, my co-host is Tim Abbey. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Margaret. It's been a while since I've seen you. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
I'm glad to be here with you today. On today's episode, we'll be joined by Mark Sellew from Pride's Corner Farms. But before we get to our interview with Mark, we'll start out with a little check-in about what Tim and I are seeing, thinking about, working on at this time of year, which is or the early part of November. And so I'm looking out my window today. We've got a very dreary, kind of rainy, gray fall day here in Philly. Tim, what are you seeing or hearing about right now?
I haven't had any site visit calls for quite some time. Things have kind of, calmed down as far as like pest issues, plant issues, but it's still extremely dry here in the Harrisburg area. I had the local weather on today, and they where they take their reading, we're 8 inches below for the year still, with no rain forecast for the next week. So that I think is, following the stress from last year's drought that we had. I think next growing season we could see, more issues with some of our longer established, trees in the area. But, it's been fairly calm. Just prepping programs, educational programs for next year is mostly where I've been spending my time.
Yeah, I find a lot of people who hear, about what my work is, they're kind of like, oh, so do you just get to kind of chill out in the winter? Must be a really quiet time. And I always find it funny because the winter is our biggest programming season, and it's when we can actually, get a hold of all of our client base who are spending the rest of the year out in the field or at their nurseries or in the landscape. And so this is generally a really busy planning time. I've actually gotten a couple of Christmas tree calls recently, and I've never really had Christmas tree calls before. And I think I'm still kind of figuring out what's going on at a couple of different places in the greater Philadelphia area. But I do think that the dry weather that we've had in the last couple of seasons has probably been really stressful. And so I don't know that there's necessarily disease out there, but certainly some stress, kind of to echo what you said about established trees just kind of dealing with compounding stressors, starting with, lots of dry weather. And so I have a feeling there's some pH and nutrient issues out there as well. But I thought that was funny. I got like 2 Christmas tree calls in 1 week, and so I'm having to learn a lot about Christmas trees all of a sudden, but it's exciting.
Well, and when people think Christmas trees, they think downtown Philadelphia, right?
Right.
So I'm glad that they found you.
Yes. It's always exciting when you get a question about something that you're not so familiar with, because it's a great excuse for us to then learn. And that's,
Right.
that's how we end up building our expertise on all these things. So I hope the questions keep coming. And in the meantime, we'll just be, prepping for all these great events and programs happening over the winter. So no, we don't just chill out in the winter. I wish that we did,
No.
but we have a lot going on. All right. Well, it's really nice to check in with you, and I hope we do get a good, nice rain, some good rain before the winter gets here. So let's bring on our guest for today's episode. Mark Sellew is the president and owner of Pride's Corner Farms in Lebanon, Connecticut. Am I saying Lebanon correctly, or is it Lebanon?
Nope, you said it just like you say in Pennsylvania.
Okay, I've been working on that. So I'm getting my Pennsylvania pronunciations down, and I'm glad that it applies to Connecticut. Um, and so welcome to the show, Mark. We're so glad to have you today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Margaret and Tim. It's nice
Hi,
to be
Mark.
here.
It's good to see you again.
Yes, indeed.
So let's just start out. Well, maybe some of our listeners are wondering, why we're interviewing someone from Connecticut today. And so I'll maybe just let Tim say a little bit about this connection. Not that we haven't had out of state guests on before, but just to make the connection between Pennsylvania and Connecticut. So, Tim, do you want to give a little background there?
Sure. So my first real job that I had was with the University of Connecticut Extension, and I was hired there in 1994 as the nursery IPM coordinator for the state, which, through extension, which sounds really impressive, but I think Connecticut has 8 counties total, so statewide makes it's not like it's Texas or Alaska or anything, but in that role, I was to work with nurseries, like kind of a very intimate relationship, trying to help improve like pest management with the goal of cutting down on pesticide applications. And I think my original nurseries that I worked with were 3, and one of those was Pride's Corner Farms that I met with Mark, and I don't remember all who I met with because it was so long ago, but they were willing to take a chance and work with this young guy who was in a new position, and worked with them for a number of years. And then I would rotate to other nurseries. But the time that I was in Connecticut, I stayed in touch with them and watched the nursery grow so much while I was there. And it's done nothing but continue to grow since I left Connecticut almost 17 years ago. So I wanted to just reconnect with Mark and just see how things are at the nursery and talk to him and get his insights into being in the nursery business now for, I'm assuming it's probably over 30 years now. So please correct me, Mark, if I'm wrong. I reached out to him and he was gracious enough to join us.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And is 30 is, I wish it's 44.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, time flies.
It does.
When you're having fun, I don't know if it's always been fun, but it's surely been a great journey.
Yeah, Mark, could you tell us a little bit about Pride's Corner Farms and what your role is there?
Sure. Pride's Corner, as I said, 44 years in counting, and started very, very small. We actually grew greenhouse tomatoes early and switched to rhododendrons and azaleas in 1980, and just kept at it. And when you stay at it long enough, I love plants and I love figuring out how to grow them, and I learned a little more about how to be a good boss. I was an okay boss early, but I think I got better at that, and I've been able to retain some incredibly talented people here at Pride's Corner. And today we have 700 employees at our peak, and we have 4 locations all within the state. I bought 3 other nurseries, Tim, since you left, Mullane's, Robert Baker's nursery in Suffield, and Holdridge's nursery.
Wow.
So, and we ship a lot of plants to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a great state. We have tremendous customers and partners in Pennsylvania.
So you're doing field material now too, along with container?
No, always stayed in containers.
Okay.
Yeah. Never took the field route.
Okay. Wow. That's again why I wanted to talk to you, because that's, you've seen a lot, as you mentioned, some other nurseries that for whatever reason, are no longer around. And it's not just in Connecticut, but obviously other states that,
Sure.
You've continued to be successful. And so, this is a very broad ranging question, but what do you think has been some of the keys to your success in the ornamental plant industry?
Yeah. Well, I honestly, I loved plants, and I love figuring out how to grow everything. So we grow over 3,000 varieties. That's great to say you grow all these varieties, but that's just the beginning. It gets people to pay attention to you. But really, what has been the difference for us has been a very customer focused approach. I'd say if there's anything that I would say is different, I see nurseries that don't put the customer first. They put their product first or the rules first, and I would say that's a difference that we've tried to strive for, is always putting the customer first. And as I said, I've retained an incredible team here that's allowed us to grow. And it took us a while to get the quality to the consistency that, particularly customers far away wanted. And we've been able to do that over the years. And recently we went to carts. We're shipping more and more plants on carts. With the labor issues, people really love getting carts from us. And the online ordering technology has been a huge factor in our growth recently in the last 5 years, with an ERP system with real numbers, and people can go on at their leisure anytime and put an order in online. And now they can put their pricing in for retail if they're a retailer. And generally we ship within 48 to 72 hours of any order we get.
Wow. I
And
want
are
to just
you doing all wholesale, or is there some retail in there as well?
No, all wholesale,
All wholesale.
strictly wholesale.
just want to go back to something you did mention about your employees. I was when I worked in Connecticut, I was there a little over 12 years. And like I think in all parts of the country with the green industry, there's a high turnover of people, whether it's in wholesale nurseries or landscaping companies. But I know from my interactions with you when I was there that a number of employees were there that whole 12 years that I was in Connecticut, and I know they were there before I came to Connecticut. And I think that really is a testament that you were able to keep, as you said, those good employees, because they have that historical knowledge, for how things work there, and they understand what the mission of the, your business is.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of them have retired now or, are gone because, but that was always one thing that stood out. As you kept those employees.
I'm glad you saw that. We did have one very difficult, I don't want to call it a black swan event, but it's always interesting to hear how people respond to problems or big issues. And we had an ICE audit 12 years ago where Immigration Customs Enforcement came in and audited our I-9s, and we lost 150 employees in May of spring of 2012. And that was a real difficult for us. Unfortunately, many of them, they weren't deported. They were just asked, we just had to let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them stayed. A few went back to their respective countries. But that was that put us on a different route for our labor force, where we use now the guest worker program called H-2A. And we have over 300 H-2A. So the 700 workers, 300 are guest workers. Mm. And those 300 guest workers really make us a better employer, because all my section growers, foremen, supervisors now have a labor force that's very wants to be here, wants to work and work hard, and it's allowed us to perform and really execute at a very, very higher level as a result of really everybody at Pride's, from the labor up to the top, is doing really good work. We don't really have a dead weight at all at Pride's, which I'm very proud of.
You think labor's still in the top three of like the issues you have to deal with as a business?
No.
Oh, okay.
So that's where it's different. Because
awesome.
of because of the H-2A program.
Okay.
If I had to hire local workers for those 300 workers, that would be difficult. Is an understatement.
Okay. Yeah. That's
maybe impossible, and to get them, with proper work authorization would make it even doubly difficult. So anyways, you just have to be a great employer. I talked to a lot of garden centers about health issues. There's a lot of, they're really, it's really difficult to, we hear it from our customers. all over the place. So, we're kind of an anomaly, but, as I explained to you, but I always say that, the flexibility that we have as a company today is almost triple what it was 10 years ago. And COVID even amplified that even more. And I just feel that everyone has to be incredibly flexible as an employer now. To be an employer of choice is what I say. If you're not, you got to have fair wages. I think wages have gone up, and the family business culture is really good in many of the businesses, and that's a really great culture. I feel very strongly about that at Pride's. But the flexibility is a when I see that's I see a lot of different viewpoints of what flexibility means to many different employers, and I always say you can't be flexible enough. That sounds a little controversial, maybe, but I just like to say that.
But if it's working for you and you're retaining employees and you're still being profitable, then it's a system that has tremendous.
It's working for Pride's Corner. Yes, it is.
Yeah, because I think between myself and Margaret and the two other extension educators who are kind of lurking in the background today, when we interact with our clientele, usually the top two things that they deal with or want help with are pest related issues, and then it's business labor issues.
I know,
which is way outside of my wheelhouse to help with running a business or labor. So that's a positive thing to hear, that at least you've found a system and it's working for you.
Yes.
So as extension educators, we're always interested too in how businesses educate and train their workforce. And so I wonder, do you seek out education externally? Do you do training internally? How do you make sure that your workers are not only trained, but continuing in their professional development and learning the latest skills and things that they need to be successful?
Yeah. Well, it's multi-pronged, Margaret. I mean, we definitely need some outside help, and we work with UConn and UConn Extension to do continuing education, particularly in the winter. We do a lot of pest and disease management, and that's been helpful. Some of our vendors, BASF and Valiant, there's a lot of those biofungicides and biopesticides that we're really working on that I find very interesting. And so there's a big change there in chemistry that we're using to try to keep powdery mildew down or boxwood blight. We have to have very strong disease and pest prevention programs that keep us pest free. And I'm looking to do it with more of those biofungicides and biopesticides. I don't know. Don't ask me a lot about them, but I'm very intrigued by them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely some cutting edge stuff that we're all interested in as well.
Yeah.
But it just occurs to me that as an employee of somebody, it's very that is a good way, hopefully, to increase retention is, or you would think it is, to invest in the training and the skills and the sort of building of the development of somebody professionally over time. And so that's kind of why I was curious about that as part of your system of hanging on to the best folks.
The people want to learn. That's what I always hear. I like my job when I'm learning stuff. And so that's something that we really focus on too. Everyone gets a mentor. We're onboarding better than we used to. We used to bring someone on and show them a video about not not poison yourself because of all the pesticides I always love that. I shouldn't say I love that. I hate the video. We have to do it. It's the rule. But we have an onboarding video. We give them all kinds of swag, and then we check in with them every month. The first year, we found out that most of our turnover is with new employees. If we can keep them for a couple of years, the chances of them staying, retaining, and growing and it becoming a career are much higher. So we actually were not doing a good enough job of paying attention early in that person's time of starting their career at Prize.
As the nursery's grown, in terms of like just the volume of plant material that you're turning over, how much of that is done like in-house, whether from seed or cutting propagation, versus like what you have to buy in?
Yeah, it's multi-pronged again. Tim, we have our own tissue culture lab. I love growing Mount Laurel. We had a lab when you were here, but we just put a new lab in. I'm very excited about it. You can't propagate Mount Laurel from cuttings, as you know, and seed's too slow. So we have a lot of, it's a signature plant for us, Mount Laurel, and it's a state flower, Pennsylvania and Connecticut. And I would say that when a company, a garden center, particularly further away, says why buy from Pride's Corner, you have a good looking Calmia that really helps them at least pay attention to it. So we stick. I think I actually we stick about 13 million cuttings here a year. The perennials all come from Central America and South America. So we almost take no cuttings off our own perennial stock. We get them in from those unrooted cutting farms from that are all through Central and South America. We get cuttings in every Monday or Tuesday, and we're sticking perennials 12 months a year.
Wow.
So that's interesting. Yeah, as far as the global supply chain, with the perennials, woodies is much more internally. We get most of our cuttings off our own stock, and what's an interesting trend too is straight species with native plants. I was the old style. I always had to find that cultivar, nativar. Nativar is like a dirty word now. You can't say that; you get in trouble. And so we're looking for more straight species and doing more of that because the native plant movement is just exploding for us. I own with Steve Castorani at North Creek Nurseries, American Beauties native plants, and it's been a real fun ride recently. And again, Juniperus virginiana. I was always trying to propagate a selection, Brody or Taylor. And right now, what everyone wants is the straight virginiana. So we got to pay attention to the marketplace.
I was going to ask about.
No, I was just going to say that's a cool connection with one of our regional, very well-known native plant nurseries here in North Creek. I didn't realize that you had that connection. And one of my questions was going to be about the plants you grow and how that stock has kind of shifted over time. And I was going to sort of anticipate you saying that there was more of a drive to produce more natives. And I'm curious, does that, I guess it's coming from your customers who are wholesale customers, but they must be getting that feedback from their retail customers or homeowners or whoever they're working with. But kind of curious to hear, how does that work? So how do you decide when to increase inventory of a certain type of plant, or maybe that's too big of a question, but how does that information make its way to you? Like, hey, we should really be investing more in natives and straight species natives in particular, because this is what our customers want.
Well, picking what to grow is, we never pick the right amount. I always say to anyone who's doing production planting or Prize, remember, you'll either grow too much or too little of a plant. So don't sweat, just make sure you're paying attention. But I would say that the particularly straight species movement is really strong in the commercial landscape space. Even more so than with the homeowners. The homeowners are somewhat interested in straight species. Our American Beauty program has a lot of selections, and we have to do a better job of telling people that these selections of straight species are actually have the integrity or the same ecosystem value as the straight species. Phlox paniculata Jenna. Steve Castoroni, the owner, always says to me that has more pollinator value than the straight paniculata. So it's but there's strong opinions, and everyone has that. But I'm kind of I would say the other trend on what we grow and how we grow it is with brands. Along with native plants, proven winners, the Endless Summer, Knockout. There's another company in Pennsylvania we do a lot of business with, Star Roses. Brands have been a big part of our growth as well. Initially, everyone thought it was a conspiracy by growers to get more money for their plants, but it really wasn't. There really were better plants there, and they're particularly better now because everyone is vetting those new introductions, I think, very well. Everyone has their opinions on that, but it's been amazing, the explosive growth of brands, particularly proven winners, Endless Summer and Knockout, and how much it's added value to our industry. We are getting more money for our plants. I am, and our customers are, and it's added a tremendous amount of again value to our industry.
I'm going to admit some of my own ignorance here. I think the first time that I became aware of like the Proven Winners series, if that's the proper name for it, was still when I was in Connecticut, and I think it was when you got involved with it. And I don't know if somebody from Pride's presented on it or just from interacting. How do those things work? Like how, because you're involved with that and the American Beauties and so many other those branding things. How do you search them out, or because you were involved with the American Beauties from the start?
Yeah. The difference with American Beauties, it's not proprietary plants, so okay. It's more of a belief system that we have. All the other brands are proprietary plants that we pay a royalty on, that they control the access and the propagation of it. So it's very different. Proven Winners is run by a company out in Western Michigan, Spring Meadow Nursery. Dale Deppy and Tim Wood have searched the world for plants. They have their own breeding program. So they are only introducing Proven Winners, Tim, brand new plants that are all protected by patents and royalties.
What's the turnaround time on that from like when they start to propagate it till when it's actually like in heavy production and out for like retail sale?
I'd say about 10 years.
Is it? Yeah,
it's a long time. Yeah. People don't realize that, but they invite garden centers out there. Any garden centers listening to this, they should go out to the garden center open house they have every August at Spring Meadow. And garden centers we've asked to go out there, we're just amazed at the amount of work and vetting and time it took to really select what they do. Right now they have a success problem, I'd say, and this is I'm giving you a very opinion here, but there's almost too many hydrangeas right now, and Wigelia and Spirea, and we need more plants with a purpose, I like to say, and we don't need another pretty pink hydrangea. And I think but the industry shares that sentiment right now.
This is a completely different line of questioning here. This is something like that, again, all of us, involved with the podcast today and other extension educators, is one of the challenges that we've seen on our own and have had people bring to us, is trying to get the younger generation, and this is going into middle school, high school, early college, interested in horticulture as a profession, whether it's doing what you do as a grower or what we do is in education. Any insights that you have that we could try to spur people into this industry?
Oh boy, Tim, there's a good question. There are less people going to college to study horticulture, and horticulture programs are kind of dying on the vine. They really are. They've all gone to, we try to hire, we go to an open house at UConn. We heavily recruit at UConn, and we're lucky to get one grad a year there, honestly. Wow. And so that is a challenge. I have to tell you, it really is. And,
I don't know if younger people they get no exposure to it from their parents or any other sort of advisory person in their life, where they just think of horticulture as like going out to mow grass. I guess this is my
Yeah, I
thoughts on
know.
this. Like they don't see it as a rewarding, financially profitable way to make a living. And so they just discount it before actually even exploring it.
Yeah. Yeah. The good news is the young consumers going to the garden centers. I've heard that again and again, that the millennials like to garden. Whether
We
COVID.
do.
Is that true, Margaret?
Yay!
Yeah, we do, and my friends do too. And I was just thinking, because you use that term plant with a purpose, and I kind of wonder if that's not part of the solution is I think and I don't know that my generation or Gen Z or anyone younger, I can't speak for everyone obviously, but it seems as though people are looking for purpose in their work as well. And there is a lot of interest in ecological gardening and natives and providing resources for wildlife, and also how that crosses into social justice issues and the wider community. How can we use horticulture to help our neighbors? And I don't know exactly how how you incorporate that into the day-to-day work of horticulture, but I think that it's possible, and I kind of wonder if that's part of the that has to be part of the sell to these new generations about the work beyond, it pays well and provides, these benefits and is sustainable on your body and things like that. But yeah, it's an issue, but I do think there is hope there that, my generation and younger people are going to the garden centers. It starts with houseplants and then they get hooked and expand beyond that. But yeah, I can say for sure we're the people my age who I know are very, especially after the pandemic, very interested in plants where maybe they weren't before.
Yeah.
So there's hope there.
There is, absolutely.
Yeah. I was kind of also curious about, in terms of how you kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry and new trends, if trade associations or professional organizations were important to you, like the Perennial Plant Association or some of those organizations. I know I've gotten a lot of inspiration by attending those meetings and seeing what the plant of the year is and what the kind of the trends look like. Have you found that to be helpful in your business?
Absolutely, Margaret. I would say you have to have that outward focus. A lot of people become too inward, and I can't tell you enough. PPA, IPPS. We have active people at all these meetings, and and I like to get people out visiting our customers too. So that's always a good thing as well. But very, very important.
One thing that we were talking about before we started recording, that one of the challenges that you deal with, and other growers, and then also just landscaping people, is the issue of some of like the invasive pests that we deal with. In Pennsylvania, and I know now in Connecticut, you're dealing with like spot and lanternfly. But you had mentioned before we came on with like box tree moth being found up in Massachusetts. It's a challenge that I think, is an educator trying to reach people early, is one of the best things that we can do as far as like on our end. But I think the challenge we run into also is just, as you mentioned, like horticulture is not a field that a lot of younger people are going into. I also think that, like either like extension educator or like a regulatory official, like here it's the Pennsylvania Department of Ag, and up I think in Connecticut was the Department of Environmental Protection, who do like the regulatory work to try to combat these issues. I just think there's like a shortage of staff. I guess I'm looking for two things. One, if there's any insights you have, like how we can do a better job of trying to reach people about the impact that exotic species have on the green industry, and then also what are some of how do you meet these challenges as a business?
Well, this boxwood tree moth is really I thought boxwood blight was going to be a game changer. We've managed boxwood blight. It's managed We're inspected. We sign compliance agreements with respective states, including Pennsylvania. And I feel like it's kind of, but it's not something that's both really reducing demand for the product, or we have it under control. The moth is a completely different entity right now because it's federally regulated, and I would say that the challenge for us is industry, government, and extension has to come together with these serious pests and really come up with what is going to be the best solution going forward. Right now, Massachusetts, as I said, quarantined the entire state effective this spring because the state didn't have the resources to monitor the pests statewide, and it's only in Cape Cod. If that happened in Connecticut, they find the moth in one corner of Connecticut and they quarantined the entire state, that would be that would impact us in the million. That would have multi-million dollars of impact to Pride's Corner. This is I don't know what the solution is. I feel that I should be able to. I guess the only thing I would say as a grower that I have to make sure I'm boxwood moth free and I'm inspected and I sign compliance agreements, but I should be allowed to ship those plants where I want to. That's I don't know if that sounds selfish, but right now because of the multi-million dollar size of the market for boxwood, there's got to be some innovative solutions that really started in Washington there because of the federal regulations.
Yeah, I think as I think all of us know, I mean, that's a challenge, whether it's on a federal or just like a state level. That a lot of times with like with a background in entomology, I think of insects before I think of pathogens. It's by the time you get anybody to really care, and by care I mean you like invest money into trying to come up with like research to control it or learn more about a particular pest, it's past the stage where you really could have eliminated the problem, possibly eliminated it. And it was the same thing, I think with like spot and lanternfly here. It was detected, it was it was brought to everybody's attention, but at that point it still really hadn't caused any sort of damage yet. So nobody really, and I mean like more higher up who had the purse strings, nobody really cared too much. So not a lot went into it early on, and then it continued to spread.
Is that impacted horticulture or what has been the impact of spotted lanternfly? I mean, I know that the epicenter was southeastern Pennsylvania. So
Margaret and I are like the closest to like where it started. And I was here when it was first detected. And, there's quarantine counties in Pennsylvania where you have to go through the compliance, and you also are supposed to go through training on how to do like, vehicle inspections, equipment inspections before you travel either within a quarantine county or going to one that's not quarantined, particularly for like adults. So you're not moving adults around. And I think most people have fallen in line and of doing, what they have to, as far as like, just like you've had to, do that for some of the pests you deal with. Actual impact on the horticulture industry. I have not seen it be an impact on ornamental plants, whether those are in a landscape or in a nursery. I have them at my house. They've never done any sort of damage. The only place that I'm aware of, at least in Pennsylvania, and I think in other states, there have been some vineyards who've had significant losses of plant material because grapes, whether they're cultivated or wild, are like one of their favorite host plants. So definitely for them, they've been an issue. But there's a fairly new paper that came out of one of the Penn State labs working on it, where they looked at kind of like some long-term impacts on like hardwood trees, and that there was no significant negative impact on tree health. So maybe it's not going to be an issue, but with like box tree moth caterpillars, I mean, they decimate. I mean, they strip foliage and plants are going to end up dying. So different pest complex, I guess, or damage. Have
Something
a great
that
solution.
Mark, you mentioned quickly, I think before we started recording, when we were talking about box tree moth, is boxwood has a lot of pest pressures on it right now, and I think something we've talked about in previous podcast episodes is these plants that we rely really, really heavily on to perform lots of different functions in the landscape. And boxwood is a perfect example because it's used, to as a hedge. It's used to demarcate areas. It can be pruned in various ways. It can be tall, short. It's just used so heavily. And as somebody who enjoys learning about native plants and different sorts of plants that are maybe underutilized, my first thought is, well, let's replace it with something else. But you brought up, what's out there that could be used to replace all of the functions that something like boxwood, or, we're starting to see stressors on arborvitae, which is also really key in our landscapes here. It's not always easy to swap out these sort of landscape staples with different plants, although it's, maybe that's part of the solution. Is we need a backup or a bunch of backups to be able to use in the landscape instead. But have you come across any plants that might do the trick in one way or the other?
Well, I hate to mention one because it's not one of my favorite plants, but globe arborvitae. I mean, God, the deer love them.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know. There you go, Margaret. That's a pretty poor alternative.
Yeah.
It's a personal. I'm not a globe arborvitae fan, but
Yeah.
there's some dwarf variety selections in Ilex glabra.
Mhm.
We got a selection from Michael Durr that we introduced that we really like, a really dwarf one that's really good. It was selected out of Peggy's Cove in Canada, I think in Nova Scotia. Called Forever Emerald.
Yeah, something this kind of makes me think of another instance that is sort of similar in that it has to do with invasive species, but I give a lot of talks about invasive plants and our Pennsylvania noxious weed list, which is ever expanding and puts certain restrictions on plants that can't be sold or propagated or transported within Pennsylvania, because there's been some demonstrated
Sure.
aggressive, invasive tendencies that have a bad outcome for our economy or human health or whatever it is, ecology. But what we're seeing is when plants are added to this list, nurseries are notified by the Department of Agriculture, and they have a certain period of time to decrease their inventory. But there is a process for exemption where the plant breeder has to send in a lot of information to the PDA that shows that whatever their cultivar is that they've developed of the species that's on the noxious weed list does not have the same invasive tendencies as the straight species. But we have nurseries, in our state that for example, sell a lot of burning bush, Euonymus elatus, and they have cultivars that, from their experiences, they know are not at nearly as invasive as the straight species, but the exemption process kind of puts the burden in some ways, or at least this is what it seems like to the nursery owners I've spoken to, on them to kind of figure out how do we get this plant, which I know isn't that invasive, to be exempt from this list. And they kind of have to go through the grunt work of contacting the plant breeder and getting this information and getting it. And so I know that's an issue as well. I wish that at Extension we could take some of that burden off, but as far as dealing with invasive insects and plants, it just seems difficult in a lot of different ways on the actual industry and on the people who are selling these plants for a living.
Yeah, no doubt. We actually got a cultivar exemption in Pennsylvania for a barberry that was bred at University of Connecticut.
Yes,
And
yes.
back to as you say, some of your colleagues in Pennsylvania see some sterility in burning bush. What we learned is, we had a scientific paper that authenticated, at a university level, a peer-reviewed article that gave us the credibility to know that this barberry was truly sterile.
Yep.
And that's the only way you get the cultivar exemption, as you alluded to.
Right. And right now, I think there are 4 cultivars that have that exemption
Correct.
status, and it's only for barberry. That's the only plant that has any exempt cultivars at this point. But hopefully the list grows, and it's seen as a priority to keep that scientific information coming, that shows that these cultivars are
Absolutely.
not as nefarious as their straight species are. Well, so we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here with you, Mark. And so, Tim, did you have any last questions we should ask Mark before we get to our final question?
I didn't have any questions, but if there's anybody still at Pride's that was there from my time there, tell them I said hi. I don't know. I think Sebi's still working there.
Debbie's still going strong, Tim.
Is he?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
well, tell him I said hi.
I will definitely do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been so great to have you on, and we have a final question for you, which we ask all of our guests at the end of our episode, which is, could you tell us something you like to do when you're not working?
Well, I do like something much that I try to do, and I'll be doing it tomorrow morning. I'm a mountain biker.
That's
I
right.
love to be in the woods. I love the challenge of it, the camaraderie. I've got a couple of guys I go with all the time, and I've been to Utah, Scotland, Colorado, but I still say the mountain biking here in Connecticut is the best. I've always wanted to go to like a place like Jim Thorpe, and I know there's good mountain biking around there, but keeps me young, keeps me with the energy that you really need.
Awesome.
That's great. Yeah, it must be a beautiful time of year to get in some good rides before
Oh,
it gets too wintry up there.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast today and sharing about Pride's Corner and the work you do up there. So thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mark.
you. Yeah. Good to see you, Tim, again, and nice
Yep.
meeting you, Margaret. Yes.
You too. All right. Take care.